I need to tell you something that most attorneys in my field are not saying out loud yet. Artificial intelligence can now reproduce your grandchild's voice. Exactly. In real time. And people are using it to call grandparents and take everything they have saved. My name is Patricia Cole. I'm an elder law attorney with 18 years of experience protecting seniors from financial exploitation. I have handled cases involving fraudulent power of attorney documents, stolen inheritance, insurance fraud, and family betrayal. But what I am seeing in my office right now, in this current period, is something that requires a different kind of warning. Not because it is more morally terrible than what came before, because it is moving faster and it is harder to detect than anything I've encountered in nearly 2 decades of practice. I chose this field because of my Aunt Helen. She was 74 when she lost her life savings to a financial advisor her son had introduced. The advisor was charming, credentialed, and patient. He took 2 years to build her trust before he systematically moved her money into accounts she did not understand and could not access. By the time any of us realized what was happening, the legal options were limited and the money was largely gone. I sat across from her in her kitchen after she found out, and I decided that same afternoon that I was going to spend my career making sure other people had someone fighting for them before that conversation happened. What I am about to explain is not theoretical. It is what I am documenting in active cases right now. The technology exists. The operations using it are running. And the population they are targeting is the same population I have spent 18 years trying to protect. Let me tell you about Walter. He was 76 years old, a retired electrician who had worked since he was 17 years old. He had raised 3 children, buried one of them, and built a life that included a paid-off home and $69,000 in savings he had accumulated over the course of 5 decades. Not an extravagant man, a careful one. He clipped coupons. He drove the same truck for 14 years. He did not make financial decisions quickly. His grandson Jeremy was 21 and in his second year at a community college in another state. Walter and Jeremy talked every Sunday evening without fail for as long as either of them could remember. Walter had been at Jeremy's baseball games, his graduation, every milestone that mattered. He knew that boy's voice the way you know the sound of your own front door. On a Wednesday afternoon in October, Walter's phone rang from a number he didn't recognize. He answered because that was what he did. He answered calls because there might be something important on the other end. The voice said, "Grandpa, it's Jeremy. I'm in trouble. Please don't hang up." I want to stop right here and tell you what that voice was. It was not Jeremy. It was an AI voice synthesis system generating Jeremy's voice in real time, based on audio samples collected from Jeremy's social media accounts. The person speaking through that system was a criminal reading from a script. But what Walter heard was his grandson. Every detail that makes a voice recognizable, the specific pitch, the way Jeremy shortened words, the slight accent he had picked up from his mother's side of the family, all of it was there. Because all of it had been captured in videos Jeremy had posted over the years. Walter had no framework for what he was hearing. Why would he? The idea that someone could take seconds of audio from a public video and use it to build a voice convincing enough to fool the person who had known that voice for 21 years was not something that existed in his understanding of how the world worked. It did not exist in most people's understanding until recently. These operations are exploiting the gap between how fast this technology has developed and how slowly awareness of it spreads. Let me slow down and walk you through exactly how the technology works, because understanding the mechanism is the most powerful protection available. The term AI voice cloning sounds like something from a science fiction film. What it actually is, in practical terms, is a software system that analyzes the acoustic patterns in a person's existing recordings. The pitch, the rhythm, the way they pronounce specific vowels, the precise texture of their voice. Once the system has built that model, it can generate new speech in that voice, from any text in real time, with a level of fidelity that the human brain cannot reliably distinguish from the real thing. Jeremy's voice had been trained into the system months before Walter ever received that call. The audio sources were public: clips from videos he had posted, a few seconds from a live stream, a short recording embedded in a post. The criminal operation that targeted Walter was not improvising. They had invested preparation time specifically in that target before the phone ever rang. Walter was not a random victim. He was a researched one. I want you to sit with that for a moment. These operations are not sending mass emails hoping someone falls for a generic message. They are doing targeted research on specific individuals, building voice profiles of their family members, mapping the emotional relationships, and identifying which grandparent is most likely to respond to which specific family member in an emergency scenario. The level of personalization is what separates this from every other category of elder fraud I have worked with in 18 years. The call script that the criminal read from while speaking through the voice synthesis system is also not improvised. It has been tested and refined across hundreds of calls. The objections have been anticipated. The responses are prepared. If Walter had asked to call Jeremy's cell phone, the sergeant had a line ready. Jeremy's phone had been confiscated during processing and would be returned when he was released. If Walter had asked for the station's direct number to verify, the sergeant would have given him a number that routed back to their operation. If Walter had said he needed to think about it, the deadline would have tightened and the description of the conditions Jeremy was facing would have gotten worse. The entire call is a closed system. Every exit is covered. Every hesitation has a prepared response designed to move the target back toward compliance. This is why even careful, skeptical people end up at the bank window saying exactly what they were told to say. The system has been optimized to defeat precisely the kinds of caution that would normally protect someone. The voice told Walter that Jeremy had been in a car accident, that the other driver had been injured, that there was a legal situation and Jeremy was at a police station and needed bail money posted before a transfer deadline. Jeremy's voice was shaking. He said he was sorry. He said he hadn't meant to mess everything up. He said, "Grandpa, please don't call Dad yet. I don't want him to think I'm irresponsible. He's already been on my case about school." That specific detail about not calling Jeremy's father was selected because the person running the operation had done enough research to know the family dynamic. They had seen posts or comments or interactions that suggested a tension between Jeremy and his father. They used it. The isolation instruction was tailored, not generic, tailored to Walter's actual family. If Walter had called his son before doing anything else, the fraud would have ended immediately. His son would have called Jeremy's cell phone. Jeremy would have answered from wherever he was. The entire operation depended on Walter staying isolated, under pressure, making decisions without anyone in his life to interrupt the story being constructed around him. Isolation is not incidental to this fraud. It is the mechanism. A second voice came on the line, presenting himself as a duty sergeant. Professional tone, specific procedural language, the kind of measured authority that sounds exactly like a person doing a job they have done many times before. He confirmed the situation. He told Walter that bail had been set at $38,000. He said there was a bondsman who could handle the paperwork and that time was a factor. Walter said he did not have that kind of money liquid. The sergeant said that was fine. The bondsman worked with seniors regularly and could walk him through a structured payment from savings. The bondsman came on the line, friendly, patient, step by step. He told Walter what to say at the bank. He specified that Walter should describe the transaction as a home repair payment because flagging it as a legal matter could trigger additional review that would delay Jeremy's release. He told him not to mention his grandson because it could complicate the station's processing. He was coaching Walter to deceive the bank. Walter did it. Because Jeremy was on that call, frightened, needing him, Walter had built his entire life around being reliable for the people he loved. You showed up. That was the rule. You showed up when someone needed you, and Jeremy needed him. Walter went to the bank. He explained the transaction exactly as he had been told. The teller processed it. He drove home, tried the bondsman's callback number, got no answer. He called Jeremy's cell phone. Jeremy picked up immediately. Walter said, "Jer, are you somewhere safe? Tell me where you are." Jeremy said, "Grandpa, I'm at school. I'm in the cafeteria. What's going on?" Walter drove to my office 2 weeks later. He had spent those 2 weeks not telling anyone, trying to find an explanation that did not require him to say out loud what he suspected. His daughter-in-law eventually noticed something wrong and pressed him until he told her. She called my office and drove him in herself. When he sat down across from me, he did not look broken. He looked tired in the specific way people look when they have been carrying something alone for too long. He said, "I know his voice. I have known that boy's voice since the day he was born. That was his voice." I told him he was right, and I told him what I am telling you now. If any of this feels close to home right now, either because something similar happened to someone you love, or because this is the first time you are hearing about this and something in you knows you need to share it with someone specific, please subscribe to this channel and leave a comment. I read every one. I post here because the law cannot fix this after it happens, and the only intervention that reliably works is you understanding how it operates before the call comes. On the legal side, I filed reports with the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, the FTC, and Walters Bank. The bank filed an investigation. The FBI was straightforward with Walter. They told him they were aware of the operation type and would pursue what leads they had, but that recovery of funds in cases like his was unlikely. The money had cleared through a series of accounts, and most of it had already moved internationally before Walter's report was filed. That is not the FBI failing. Wire transfers are irreversible by design. The accounts these operations use are constructed specifically to sever the trail before any institution with legal authority can act. The gap between when the transfer clears and when a victim files a report is the window these operations are built to exploit. By the time the first report is filed, the money has already been distributed across jurisdictions that require months to access through proper legal channels. I want to address something that comes up in almost every case I handle: the question of why elderly people specifically. The answer is not flattering to say, but it needs to be said clearly. This generation has accumulated more financial assets than younger generations have had time to build. They are also, statistically, less likely to have grown up with an intuitive understanding of AI capabilities. The gap between financial accumulation and technological awareness is what these operations are engineered to exploit. They are not targeting weakness. They are targeting a specific and predictable combination of resources and a knowledge gap that most people in this age group have not had reason to close. There is also something that does not get said often enough. The instinct to respond immediately to a family member in distress, the instinct that Walter acted on, is not a character flaw. It is the product of decades of being the person who showed up. These operations weaponize exactly the qualities that made people like Walter the reliable, decent human beings they are. That is worth naming clearly because the shame that follows these cases is misplaced. The shame belongs to the people who built this, not the people who love their grandchildren too much to stop and question. I want to address one more thing that rarely gets said in the official guidance around this type of fraud. When these cases come to my office, the victim almost always arrives with a layer of shame that has nothing to do with what actually happened. They believe they should have known better. They replay the call in their head and think about the moment they could have questioned it. They feel that their love for their grandchild was a flaw that was exploited, rather than a virtue that was targeted. I want to be clear about this because the clarity matters. What happened to Walter was not a consequence of being naive or unaware or emotionally open. It was a consequence of being precisely targeted by a sophisticated, well-resourced criminal operation that had done its homework on him specifically. You do not defeat that kind of operation by loving your grandchildren less. You defeat it by having a system in place in advance that your love cannot override in the moment of manufactured crisis. That is what the 3 steps I'm about to give you are designed to do. There is also a practical dimension to reporting that I want to raise before I give you the steps. Many victims do not report because they are ashamed or because they believe recovery is impossible and the report will not accomplish anything. Recovery is unlikely, and I will not pretend otherwise. But reporting matters for a different reason. Each report adds to the data that law enforcement and financial institutions use to identify patterns, track operations, and build cases against the criminal groups running these calls. Your individual case may not produce a recovery, but your report, combined with the reports of 30 other people who were targeted by the same operation, may produce an investigation that shuts the operation down before the next 30 people lose their savings. That is worth doing, even when the money cannot come back. Here is what you need to do before the call comes. First, establish a family code word today. A word only people in your immediate family know. Not a birthday, not a nickname that might appear anywhere online. Something arbitrary that is not findable. Anyone claiming to be a family member in an emergency must produce that word. If they cannot, the call ends. This is the single most reliable protection against this specific category of fraud. Second, establish a callback rule. Any emergency call requesting money requires a callback to the person's known number before any action, not the number given during the call, the number already in your phone. If Jeremy answers his cell phone, the problem is real. If he does not or something is not right, the call was fraudulent. This rule has to be established in a calm conversation before any pressure exists. Because in the moment, when the voice you love is asking you to hurry, you will not be thinking about verification. The rule has to be in place before you are in that moment. Third, any instruction to keep the emergency from another family member is the fraud identifying itself. Legitimate emergencies do not require secrecy. Officers conducting real police business do not ask you to hide a crisis from your son. The moment that instruction comes, hang up and call the person they are impersonating on their actual number. I have been in this field for 18 years. I have sat across from hundreds of people who came to me after something preventable had already happened. Walter is one of them. He is not defined by this. He is a man who worked hard his entire life and loved his family completely. What happened to him happened because people with resources and technology targeted exactly that. I want to tell you something else about Walter's case that I think is important for the specific audience watching this. When Walter finally told me about the 4 days he spent not saying anything to anyone, he described the experience as something he had never felt before. He was not a man who kept things from his family. He had been a reliable person his entire adult life, showing up, being honest, being the person others could count on. That was his identity. But in those 4 days, he could not bring himself to say what had happened. Not because he was ashamed of going to the bank, because he was ashamed of having believed the voice, of having felt, in that moment, with absolute certainty, that Jeremy was on that phone. He felt that his certainty itself had been the problem, that the love and the recognition he had for his grandson had been the weakness that was exploited. And that is the cruelest part of this specific fraud. It does not leave its victims feeling cheated. It leaves them feeling that their own love was the flaw, that the relationship that mattered most to them was the entry point, and that shame is a second injury on top of the financial one, designed or not, that compounds the damage in ways that are hard to measure. I want to be direct about this because the people most likely to be watching this video are people who love their families completely and would do anything for them in a genuine emergency. That is exactly who these operations target. Not because love is a weakness, because love, in the absence of a pre-established system, produces immediate action under pressure. An immediate action under pressure before verification is what produces the transfer. The code word and the callback rule are not barriers to love. They are the structure that allows love to function safely when someone is trying to weaponize it against you. There is one more category of detail I want to cover before I close. The operations running these calls are not static. They adapt. In the last 12 months, I have seen 3 variations that were not present when I started tracking these cases. Some operations are now running 2-stage calls, where the initial contact does not mention money at all, and a second call comes days later presenting as law enforcement with a warrant. Some are adding emotional confirmation loops, where the synthetic grandchild's voice returns at the end of the call to thank the grandparent and say everything is going to be okay. That last contact, coming after the money has been sent, is designed to delay the moment of realization. And some operations have started using SMS verification codes as part of the fraud, adding a layer of apparent legitimacy that makes the interaction feel more official. I tell you this not to overwhelm you, but because the code word and the callback rule defeat all of these variations. They are not designed to stop a specific version of the fraud. They are designed to introduce a verification step that the fraud cannot provide, regardless of how the script evolves. The code word is the one thing a synthetic voice cannot produce because it is a private, shared secret that does not exist anywhere that can be collected. That is why it works. Please share this with the people in your life who need to hear it before it is their phone ringing. Set up the code word conversation this week, not when you get around to it. Subscribe to this channel. There are more cases I need to tell you about, more mechanisms, more ways the system is currently failing people who deserve protection. I will keep posting because staying quiet is not something I know how to do anymore. Not while I am still seeing what I am seeing. The voice sounded real because it was built to sound real. Now you know what it was built from. And now you can protect yourself before you ever have to find out the hard way.